this is a set of activities that we have with us. And if you see, it's very simple. There are 9 activities, A to I. And in these activities, the first 2 activities, A and B, they are the starting activities here. And activity C is dependent on 2 of the activities. Activity A with a finish to start relationship. When there's no relationship mentioned, it means the default relationship finish to start is there. But for activity B, you see here, there's a finish to start relationship with a 2 days lag. And do you remember what do we mean by lag here or
Yes, sir.
internal?
It's
Okay.
two
It is,
days delay.
yeah, 2 days delay or 2 weeks delay. If the duration is in weeks, obviously it's in weeks then, right? Okay, so that means when we introduce a delay between 2 activities, we actually refer it to as lag, and it is shown by a positive value here. And similarly, if you see in this case, it's a negative sign with 5 days, that is finish to start relationship. And this -5 is indicating that we have introduced a lead in that. And what do we mean by lead? Let's say these are 2 activities. Rather than starting it once the first activity is finished, I'm starting this activity 5 days earlier or 5 weeks earlier than the first activity is finished. Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay, so now with this basic, intro of lead and lag, now let's start attempting this. Okay, now there could be any format that you may follow. However, here I'm following this legend for our practice session, and that is this block would be indicating the early start, and this block would be indicating the early finish. Now here I would write the name or code of the activity, and here I would be writing the activity duration. And then here it's a late start and it's late finish. And I guess you must be familiar with it, correct?
Yes, sir.
This
Yes, sir.
part indicates the slack or float, although you can write activity description here, but for now, I'll just keep the thing simple and I'm just omitting this part. Okay, so now let's start and how to create this network diagram here. Here I have the same, here on the right bottom corner, I have, the same list of activities with the precedence and activity duration estimates. Okay, so now how to start it? You see, the first 2 activities which don't have any, any predecessor with it, and that would be starting point of my network diagram. And so here, the first 2 activities are A and B with their duration written here, 8 days, and the next is 7 days, correct? Now, how to, the early start of this activity, A would be 0, obviously, and the early start of activity would also be 0 here. There are 2 different conventions that are followed to draw a network diagram. Some people write 1 here instead of 0, and they start it from the first day 1. But obviously, then there's a problem. They need to cater for this difference in whatever subtraction or addition they will do for the rest of the project. Starting it with the 0 is actually convenient or easier, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so now obviously, it's very simple that if it is starting here at day 0 and there are 8 days that are required to complete this activity, the early finish of this activity would be 8. Similarly, if I start it on day 0 and the duration of this task B is 7 days, the early finish of this task would be 7 days. That means at the earliest, this task would be finished on day 7th, right? Okay, now, many people follow different approach to draw a network diagram, like what to draw next then. What I do is like, okay, now this is activity A. Here I would see all those activities that are dependent on activity A so that I can draw those activities right in front of A, right? And here if you see the last activity, and what is that? I. The last activity I is dependent on A. Can you see it? Can you see it on your screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I will draw A here, I, and then another activity, C is also dependent on A, but this is, activity C is dependent on A as well as on B. So first of all, I will draw activity A right in front of here, A, and then activity C right in front of both A and B. This makes my diagram easier or easy to understand rather than drawing activity D first and then E first and so on. I look at the precedence, right? I look which activity is dependent on the previous ones, and that actually helps me in drawing a neat network diagram, correct? Although you can draw in any way you want. Okay, so now if these are the 2 activities, one is activity I with a duration of 10 days, another one is activity C with a duration of 11 days here. So now activity I is dependent on activity A. So that means if it is finished on day 8, obviously this is going to start as first activity is finished. So here the early start of activity A would be 8, right? And that means if it starts on 8th day, then I would require 10 more days to complete it. Then that means the early finish of this activity is 18, correct?
Yes, sir.
Now, looking
Yes,
at
sir.
activity or C now, now C is dependent on A as well as C is also dependent on B, but here we have a twist. And twist is that you see, according to, if I look at activity A, here I would have the early start as 8, but if I look at activity B, the activity B is ending on day 7 and we want to introduce a 2 days lag here. That means activity C could start on ninth day. So now one choice is 8 days and other choice is 9 days. So I will pick the higher one, correct? Why higher one? Can someone tell me?
Because in forward we use the higher value.
Yeah, and what is the logic? Logic is like here, let's say these are two tasks or two activities. One has a duration of 6 weeks, other has a duration of let's say 4 weeks, and the next activity is dependent on both of these, right? So now I cannot start the next activity until both of these are finished. Even though this is finished on fourth week, but still I'll have to wait for first activity to be completed. Only then I can start this third one, right? So that's why I'm picking the higher value here. So according to this, 9 is a higher value, correct? And therefore,
Yes,
the earliest start of C would be day 9, correct? And if that is the case, obviously, in that case, 9 plus 11, the early finish of activity C would be 20. So now we are done with all those activities that are dependent on A. Now, the activity C, although it was dependent on A, but it was also dependent on B. So next thing is to find the activities that are dependent on B now. So according to this activity H, it is dependent on B, correct? But here, the relationship is finish to finish. That means activity H should also finish on day 7 along with activity B. Correct? Is it clear?
correct, sir. Yes, sir.
Right. So next activity that I'm going to draw here is H. And the relationship is finish to finish, right? When I say finish to finish, that means first I will write the early finish. And early finish should be here 7 days, correct? Because of this relation finish to finish, the activity H should also finish on day 7. So when I say write day 7 here, that means this activity has a duration of 5 days. So when I subtract 5 from 7, the early start should be 2 here, correct? So that means if I start activity H on day 2, then the duration of activity H is 5. Only then it would finish on day 7. Is it clear? So here the order is reversed. Like previously, we have been first writing the early start, then adding the duration, and it used to give us the early finish. But in this case, I'm just using the reverse method, and here we wrote finish, early finish, and then subtracted the duration from it, and that gave me the early start of activity H. Any questions so far?
No, sir. I think it's clear. It means the
Mhm.
default relation is finish to start, and in this scenario, we are using finish to finish. Therefore, we are changing our strategy, right?
Exactly, exactly. That's why we are going in a reverse order. The point is that we should finish activity B and activity H together. And this point is locked here, right? So that means we have to go in a reverse way. And we will try to establish or find a date on which we should start activity H so that this relationship is maintained. And that is of finish to finish, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, okay. Now, the next part is, we are done with I, C, and H. Now, graphically, if I look at this, now I would be interested in knowing an activity that is dependent on I, C, or H, right? So now let's start with I first. If you look at activity G, it is dependent on I and C both, correct? None
Yes,
of
sir.
the other activities have I as a predecessor. So, it will help me drawing, a clean and neat and clean network diagram. That's why I'm following this approach. Otherwise, the normal approach that you follow, you start drawing from A, B, C, D, E, F in the same sequence. That is also correct. But, sometimes it create a mess on the page, right? So that's why, just to be sure that everything is drawn neat and clean, I'm following this thing. Okay, now in this case, I will draw activity G here, which has got a duration of 4 days, and it is dependent on two of the activities. One is I and other one is C. So according to this, according to I, the early start should be 18 here, and according to C, the early start should be 20 here. But what is the rule for this? We just discussed it, that we'll take the higher one, right? So that means the
Yes,
early
sir.
start here would be 20, and when I add 4 weeks or 4 whatever months these are, or 4 days, I will simply add into this, and that means at the earliest I can finish activity G on week 24th or day 24th. Correct, G?
Yes,
So
sir.
now, can you tell me the approach that I'm following to draw this contour diagram? What should I look for now? Here, what should I look for? I will try to find an activity which is dependent on C or H, right? I'm done with I. There's no I left
Yes,
here,
sir.
So
Yes,
right?
got it.
So
Yeah.
now here, that means C is still here, and it has got a start-to-start relationship now, correct? And that is activity D. So next activity that I'm going to draw here is activity D. And it has got a start-to-start relationship with activity C, correct? That means this
So
activity,
we're going to put 9 here, I think.
yeah, very right, sir, very right. So that means this activity should also start on day 9 because C is starting on day 9, correct? So I'm putting this 9 here, and if this activity D started on day 9, then it means I will simply add 16 into it. So at the earliest, activity D can be finished on day 25th or week 25th, whatever the unit is. So now next I should look for if there is any C left. No, there's no C left now. We are left with H, right? So now here,
Yep.
activity E is an activity which is dependent on both D and H. So here I have D, and here I have H, right? So I guess this is an appropriate place to draw both of these so that I can connect them neat and clean, right? Here, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So now I will draw this activity here.
yes, sir.
Okay, so now I'm drawing activity E here, and activity E is dependent on these two activities, right? That is activity H and activity D. So according to activity H, obviously it is 7 days, and according to activity D, it is 25 days or 25
Five.
weeks, whatever, right? So that means I will pick the higher one again, and that is I'm going to start this activity on day 20 or week 25th, and this is going to finish on 32nd at the earliest because of these 7 days duration. So now next we are just left with one activity, and that is F, and it is dependent on two of the activities. One is E and other one is G, right? So now there's no space left on my screen, so obviously I will use this part here, correct? So according to this, I've drawn activity F here, which is dependent on both of the activities G as well as on activity E. However, in case of activity G, we have to introduce a delay of or a lag of 4 days. And in case of activity A, we have to introduce a lead of 5 days. Now, what does it mean? It means that according to, if I look at activity G, according to this, activity F should start on 24 plus 4 days or 4 weeks, right? That means 28, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes,
And,
sir.
and according to activity E, it should start on 32 minus 5, and that is
So it's
27.
7.
Right? So now I will pick the higher one, and that is
Yes.
28, right? So 27 from here and 28 from here. So I have chosen 28. So 28 plus this duration, it would give me the early finish as 34. So we are done with the forward pass of the network diagram and obviously the critical path method. Any doubts, any questions so far?
No, sir.
No. Okay. So now, obviously, we'll start the reverse path, the backward path, and I've just reduced the screen noise here. I've just simplified these errors now. So I will simply put 34 here as late finish. Correct? In case of
Yes.
activity F, I put 34 here. So 34 minus this duration 6, that would give me 28 as late start, right? This you must have been doing in your first semester as well. So now according to this, the float or the slack is simply 0. Now how to calculate slack? You can subtract early start from late start, or you can subtract early finish from late finish, right? Both would give you the same value, 34 minus 34, 0, or 28 minus 28, 0. So now this activity F was linked with two of the activities. One was G and the other activity was E, correct?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, now first taking activity E here. Here, if this has to start, or this has to finish on week 28, but there was a lead here. So now on backward path, we will add 5 into that rather than subtracting. On forward path, we were actually subtracting 5, right? But on backward path, we will add 5 here. So 28 plus 5 would give me 33. Correct? You see, if this will finish on 33, only then it can start on 28 and introduce a 5 days lead. Correct? Is it clear?
Yes,
Yes, sir.
Okay. So now talking about if this has to start on 33rd. Sorry, the late finish is 33 here. Then subtracting 7 from it, it would give me a late start of 26. And when I subtract 26, sorry, it has to be 1, right? Okay. So 33, 7, 36. It has to be 1, correct? It is to be corrected, right? Anyways. Now I'm just moving forward here. And activity E was linked with activity H, right? This was simple, so I'm just moving on rather than attending other parts first. So I will bring 26 here, correct? So the early finish of H, the late finish of H would be 26, and 26 minus 5, it's going to give me 21 here. Any doubts? And according to this, the float would be 19 in activity H. Okay, what about this activity that is D? Now D is again linked with this, so that means 26 would go here. 26 minus 16, the late start would be 10 days here or 10 peak years, and the float is 1 in this case too. Now, what about activity G? In case of activity G, here we had a lag of 4 days. So now we are going to subtract it. That means 28 minus 4. Is it clear? 28 minus 4. Yep. Right? We'll do exactly the reverse of what we did while going forward. Like here, it was minus 5, so we added 5. And here it was plus 5, so we are going to subtract it, right? So when I subtract it, it gives me 24, and I'll put 24 here in the late finish of activity G. So 24 minus 4, it is going to give me 20 as in late start of activity G. And 20 minus 20, the float is, or the slack is 0. Correct?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, now let's move to the next activity, and that is activity C. Now, activity C is linked with two of the activities. One is G, and the other one is D. Correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, now let's first evaluate what does G says as, right? So according to G, 20 should come here. Correct? But according to this activity D, which has got a start-to-start relationship, it means that activity C should start on 10, day 10 here, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
And then I will add 11 into it, and it should give me 21 here. Is it clear to everyone? Since activity D and C are in a start-to-start relationship, that means both of these activities should start together. And we have already calculated the late start of activity D, then it means activity C should also start on day 10. And if it starts on day 10 and the duration is 11 days, that means it would finish on day 21. Correct?
Yes,
So
sir.
now we have got two options to put here. One is 20 and other one is 21. So which one to write here? 20, the smaller one. On reverse path, we pick the smaller values. Correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, if I put 20 here, then we have got 11 days duration. 20 minus 11, that means 9. And 9 minus 9, the float is, or the slack is 0. Now, what about activity I? For activity I, things are simple. That is 20 would come here right away because it is linked with G only and that's it. So 20 minus 10, the late start would be 10 days, and 10 minus 8, that would give me 2 here. Any doubts about it?
No, sir.
Okay, now if you look at activity A, it is linked with I as well as C, correct? According to I, we should, the late finish would be 10 days, but according to C, the late finish would be 9 days. So which one to pick here? Obviously 9, right? So 9 minus 8, 1, and 1 minus 0, the float of 1 day is available here. So now what about activity B? We are just left with one activity, that is B. Now in this case, B is linked with what? C, right? But here is a relationship that is finished to start. Right. Not only we'll see there's another relationship that I've just because of the animation that I added yesterday, because I don't have board here, so because of that animation this link is missing. Anyways, so finish to start plus 2. Since it is plus 2, that means I'll subtract 2 from 9, and that means 7 would come here, correct? But
Yes.
but B is also linked with H with a finish to finish relationship. So that means this activity should finish on 26th, right? So 7 is coming from here, 26 is coming from here. Which one to pick? 7, right? So I'll just write 7 here. 7 minus 7, this is going to give me 0. And obviously 0 minus 0, float is also 0. So we are done with the backward path as well. Up to now, everything is clear?
Clear.
Yes, sir.
Okay, now, if I ask you, can you identify the critical path here?
Yes.
Yeah, so which one is that? Activities or the path on which all the activities have a 0 float, right? 0. Let me change the color. I guess so 0 here, right? Yeah. So B, then C, then G.
Good.
G here, and then F here, and then sorry. Yeah, F here. That's it, not E. Correct. So this is the critical path. Just give me a minute, right? Just a minute. Another. There are 2 other sections and they are waiting. Their class had to start at 8. Anyways, so now this is the critical path, right? I've just mentioned all the paths and durations here. Could you please mute? One of you have got some problem with the mic. I guess there's noise coming, right? Thank you. So now to calculate, please mute yourself. Everyone, please. Thank you so much. Okay, now there are so many paths here. So this is important because there's an, in your assignment, I guess, or in assignment, I've provided a practice part, right? And that part is, it contains certain questions. So this is important for you to know it. So now one path is A, I, then G, and F, right? The first path, the top one. A, I, G, and F. So how to calculate its duration? 8, this is simple, followed by 10 days for I, 4 days for G. However, here for F, we have 6 days duration, but between 4 and G, there's a lag of 4 days. So that delay would be added here, correct?
Yes,
So
sir.
this path would have a duration of 32 days. Now, what about the next one, A, C, G, F? That means A, then C, then G, again on the top, and then F, correct? So for this, 8 plus 11 plus 4 plus 6, again, at this point, there's a lag of 4 days. So we are adding 4 into this. Everybody's clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay, the next path is A, C, then D, then E, and then F, right? So here, if you see, the duration of A is 8, the duration of C is 11. Now, if you see, the D and C has got a relationship of what? Start to start, correct? That means both of these activities would start on the same day. please understand it. All of you, please pay attention here. The activity C is going to start on day 9, for example, here, and it is going to finish on day 20th. But what about activity D? It is going to start on day 9, but it is going to finish on day 25. Correct? Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
That
Yes, sir.
means 11 days of C
Yes, sir.
I've already counted, but for rest of the days of D, I would subtract 16, the duration of this activity, minus the duration of first activity. That means this part only, which is 5. Is it clear? This is 20 and this
Sir.
is 25, right? So that means 11 plus 5. In total, both of these activities are going to take 16 days. Correct? So that is what I've written here. Okay, so that means we don't need to actually add this 11. I will just pick the longer path. That is like 11 days. That's it. 16 days. That's it. Any activity which is being done in parallel, it won't make any difference. Is it clear to everyone?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I hope so. So now next is 7 days of E and then 6 days of F. But here we have a lead. So I'm going to subtract that here in my calculation. So the path would give me 32 days. Correct? Next path is BCGF, right? And in case of BCGF, we only have 2 days lag here. So I have added those 2 days here in the calculation. And then at the end, we have 4 days lag here. And I've added that lag as well. I guess no further explanation is required.
Yes, sir. It's clear.
And
Yes.
this is the critical path as well, because this is the longest path.
33, right, sir?
34. This one.
Sorry.
The one,
Yes, sir.
yeah,
Got it.
yeah. Right. The next one is BCDEF, and here the duration is 7 days. For C, it is 11 days, and there's obviously a lag of 2 days, so I've added this lag here. Followed by again the same mechanism, that is 16 minus 1, because the relationship was start to start, correct? And then
Yes, sir.
plus 7 plus 6 minus 5 because of because of this lead that is there. So it would give me 33 days. What about the last part? That is B, H, and E, and then F. The last one. Now 7 days of activity B that I've written. But what next now? Activity H. Activity H also, it started on day 2 and it also finished on day 7. That means I don't need to add anything here, isn't it?
Yes, sir. Because it finishes on the same date.
On the same day. That means both of these activities combined together will take 7 days. So plus 0, and then 7 for activity E here, and 6 for activity F here, and this minus is actually indicating, minus 5 is indicating the lead. So in total, the duration of this path is 15. So this is how we calculate the paths and their durations. Correct, Ji?
Yes, sir.
Okay, now,
Yes, sir.
now let's do some analysis here. You know, this situation in which we have got a critical path of 34 days, and there are too many near critical paths. How many near critical paths we have?
We have 4 or 5.
Four near critical paths, like 32, 33. There's only 2 weeks or 2 days duration difference between these two. So all of these 4 are near critical paths. You know, that is a terrible situation for a project manager. Why? The purpose of, you know, identifying the critical path is that project manager can focus primarily on the critical path so that it is not delayed. Because if critical path is delayed only by even a single week, it would actually increase the project duration. Correct? There's no margin, no float available on the critical path. So even if a delay of 1 week occurs or 1 day occurs on any of the activities that are on critical path, this is going to increase the project duration. So project manager actually focuses primarily on the critical path. Correct?
Yes, sir.
Right. And at the same time, a project manager must keep an eye on the near critical path as well. Because anytime if a delay of 2, 3 days or weeks occur, actually that path would become the critical path then, because that path would govern the project duration. Correct?
Yes, sir.
So that means in this particular scenario, project manager need to focus on almost all of the paths except one, right? So that if you have a lot of critical paths, more than one critical path, or a lot of near critical path, that means project manager has to focus on all the activities all the time.